And one more time, good morning, everyone. I'm going to start sharing my screen to show agenda. We have few topics today. So before we jump into topics, we need to get feedback from moderators from previous week. I see Justin is here and Regina. Regina is not here, so it's you, Justin. Do you have anything to share from last week?
No, nothing outstanding. Didn't see anything that really popped out. Although one did come in a few hours ago. I'm looking into it now. So I don't have a response right now.
Got it. All right. I think it's expected. It's a holiday week. All right. So we need to choose who is going to be a moderator next week. So any volunteers? Anyone wants to do it next week? And I'm just.
I'll step up.
Oh, thank you, Jan. Primary, and I do not want to ask Ashita because I think she does it the most. So
I don't mind doing it. It's fine.
I if you don't mind, I want to join as a secondary to Jan.
Sure. Yeah.
And, okay. Yeah. I feel like you did it too much. All right. That was quick. So I see several topics. Two of them from Dan, but I don't see him in the meeting, so he won't be able to present. Maybe we can just jump to two other topics, and maybe if Dan joins later, he can ask his question. If not, we can even just discuss it ourselves, because I think we can guess, what the question is. So next topic after Dan's topic, we have a question from Pranith. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing, trying to see if, Pranith, do you want to discuss the issue, describe the issue here?
Hi, sure.
And
am I audible?
Yes.
Thanks.
And
Hi,
let me know if you want to present, or I mean, I can just open it, or if you want to, feel free to take over a screen share.
No, it's okay. You can just open the issue. You just did. So this is my first time, so please let me know if if there's a better way of presenting this. But I'll just go through what I wanted to talk about. So we're using Argo CD to deploy our infrastructure applications right now in my team, and there was one thing that we were looking for, which is we audit every sync that takes place, and also we want to control who can sync and trigger some validation as to whether this sync is given access to, and also run some tests as part of our post sync tests after a successful sync, right? And we're doing this via the hooks that Argo CD allows. So what we've noticed was that when there's a partial or selective sync on the UI, that is when you sync only a few resources, these hooks do not get triggered. I just wanted to see if it's feasible to trigger them, make a change where we trigger these hooks even when there's a partial selective sync and you sync only specific resources. I wanted to know the feasibility and what you guys think.
I know the context. I remember why we chose not to trigger hooks. Idea was that in most cases, not in most cases, at least that's how it felt a couple years ago. So very often when someone triggers a sync hook, that's just a kind of remediation to fix the deviation. So it's not a new deployment. Usually it is just to kubectl apply changes from Git. And yeah, so, okay, it's not really like perfect explanation. I'm trying to find like the real example. So let's say, I think the real example is, let's say we have an application that consists of database and a service that read data from a database. Usually there is a pre-sync hook that migrate database and then apply a deployment spec. And so what we found is very often someone make a change on the deployment after synchronization is done and just want to revert it back to expected state in Git. And in this case, sync hook is not needed. We just want to just reapply manifests from Git. And pretty much that's the main reason why sync hooks are not executed. And maybe I can suggest okay, maybe I have one question. Can you please explain, like in your case, why do you choose to do partial sync? Why not just trigger the full sync?
So ideally, a full sync needs to be triggered, but it's just that, we are a very large team. So to prevent room for mistakes happening and people going around the door for doing these syncs, we just wanted strict policies in place for auditing purposes. And also we have test cases that run uh, after every sync to ensure that the applications have deployed healthy, and there are dynamic test cases that we run as part of post sync jobs. And we just want to ensure that, be it partial sync or full sync, we want these test cases to be triggered. In an ideal world, yes, we want everyone to not do partial syncs, only complete syncs, or just let Argo CD sync by itself. But if there are cases where people have synced partially for any reason, we still want these test cases to be executed. That was just our requirement. So I was wondering if it's an option that you considered.
I feel like both have, I mean, it's my opinion. I think both options are available. The use case I was trying to describe, I'm pretty confident about it because I think I personally do it kind of every day. Sometimes, on a dev environment, I would just play with the application, make some changes, and then use Argo CD to put it back into expected state. And in this case, just sync resources kind of one by one, and that's it. Oh, and it also, it's useful for self-heal option when Argo CD is trying to kind of fix itself. When it notices a change, it's pretty much the same idea. So when autosync decides to fix deviation in a cluster, it does not run a full sync, it uses partial sync, and so hooks are not executed. But I think your use cases also make sense. So maybe as a compromise, we can add a sync flag or sync option. That's how we call it. Basically a sync option that pretty much tells Argo CD that it should run sync hooks even if it's partial, because user said so. And I know you can set this, sync options can be set dynamically. And I guess maybe, what do you think, would it solve your use case? Like if, let's say, if you have a button, I can even demonstrate it. So on our dev instance, demo instance, just trying to make sure I'm explaining it clear. So like if in the UI or in CLI, you will have one more checkbox that pretty much says execute hooks, even if it's partial sync. And so I assuming by default, it should be set to false. But if you want to, trigger it, then whoever triggers the sync would need to select resources first and then check this option. Would it solve the use case?
Yeah, definitely, that is one way. That's something I was thinking about, and maybe we can add an annotation within the application itself. Yeah, that is a better way, because that way, no one can alter it, and we're sure that if that annotation is added, the hook will run. This way, there's a chance that someone might not check the box and just do a partial sync. So I was thinking the annotation route, but yeah, this is a step towards that. I just want.
Maybe it's already even supported because you already can set a default for sync option at application level. So the UI I'm showing right now, it's pretty much same set of sync options. And if you enable some of them, that became the default. So if we support this functionality through sync option, then you kind of get the flexibility already by default. You can either just make it default on application level or force user to choose every time.
Okay, understood. Yeah, then that works. Yeah, that would definitely be helpful.
And now I just want to ask maybe, opinion of more maintainers. Am I proposing, like, do you think any objections about adding this sync option, or maybe anyone feel it requires like a formal proposal? Typically, I think it's a no, because it won't be a big change, but is there any controversy anyone wants?
No, I think it's a good idea. I actually have heard that like confusion a couple of times, like why have my sync hooks not run? And then it turns out, oh, you have used selective sync, right? Like partial sync. That's why they didn't run. I think probably a couple of people would be happy about having this kind of sync option. I was just wondering, like, for the motivation, like in that issue, it says like where every sync in Argo CD is monitored for auditing purposes. I'm not sure. I think it hasn't changed, but Praneeth, you are aware that like if people use a selective sync, it will not be recorded in the sync history, right? So
Mhm. Right.
so that basically undermines the auditing
Part of it.
requirement
Correct.
to a certain extent. And
Mhm. Correct. But yeah, by default it would. But for us, we actually run a pre-sync job to ensure that this is part of a change request. The sync is going through as part of a change request in a production environment. So we know that we audit that by ourselves. So I think having this feature would help that way, but not directly.
yeah,
I hope I made sense.
I was wondering if it like additionally, like I like the idea of having a sync option to run the hooks on selective syncs, but I was also wondering if it would make sense to have an like an RBUG way of saying that user is not allowed to use selective sync, right?
Oh yeah. That is the first thing we were looking for actually, to disable selective sync and partial sync altogether.
I mean, right now we have an additional RBUG rule for local syncs, right? I think it's the override action.
Correct.
And maybe something similar would be viable for allowing or disallowing selective syncs. Because now, as we're talking about it, like, the motivation is totally fine. Like, we need to audit a lot of things when a sync happens. But with a selective sync, if users use selective sync, the sync will not be recorded, right? It will not show in the sync history.
Correct.
Okay, so
You will still have it in Git, like in the Git log, right? You see that stuff has changed, but you will not see that
The sync was triggered.
yes, that Argo CD actually or someone triggered the sync, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm
I
kind
think
of
they've in the same bracket of things, and yeah, this is another thing that we can consider. I agree with Jan.
So yeah, maybe I'm trying to just write some conclusion. I think there is
it's really two different things, right? I mean,
Yes.
the conclusion for this issue is that your idea of having a sync option is very good, and I think should be fine to. So my personal opinion is it should be fine without a proposal, like just have a PR up and
Yeah, I agree. And it feels like there is another idea to implement a separate RBUG check for partial sync. Right? Because that's
yeah, I mean we have override, right? I mean override is it's a little bit like I don't know, the term override is weird, but
Um,
I think it affects the local sync, right? Like if someone is allowed to sync from a local source instead from Git.
And I think it also applied when user just make a change on the resource, just using exit. That's the same override action.
Oh, okay.
So that's why it's like kind of when we let user to just manage application resources and partial sync, it's we definitely could just, I mean, if let's say if there were no backward compatibility questions, we could just have two actions
Yeah.
and partial sync. But okay, I want to write down the summary, or let's not waste time right now. I will write it down after the meeting. But it sounds like you described the conclusion about sync option, and next question is there is a valid use case to have separate airbag check for partial sync, and it has to be discussed separately. Does that sound right? I'm just asking to make sure I don't put invalid summary here.
Yeah, I think so. I think.
Okay, cool.
That's
All right. So yeah, I have recording. I will put description as soon as meeting is over, and please feel free to comment in the issue. Correct me.
Sure.
All right.
Thanks, Jan.
Okay. Thank you. So
would I be able to pick this issue up, Jan? Would I be able to work on it?
I think if you want to work on the sync option, it should be straightforward. I believe it won't be like there is no design needed, and our back I think requires more brainstorming because we need to think of a way how do we like simplest option could be just have a Boolean flag in the setting that enable and disable this new feature, so it won't break experience of existing users, and some users can opt in. And maybe there is more elegant way, but I cannot think of any right now. The problem is if we just make a code change, then all users will be forced to adjust existing Arbag settings and enable partial syncs for everyone. And that's the problem. I don't see how we can. I mean, and to prevent it, we need this additional flag.
You basically could have sync as both full sync and partial sync.
Yeah, actually,
and then like it is today, right? Like there would be no change, and maybe you could have a new action or a new verb that says full sync, right?
Yeah.
Which would only be full sync, and then if people want to disable a partial sync, they would just remove the sync and add the full sync.
That's
but full sync, it sounds a little bit strange, to be honest. Like maybe a better word for that, but just that would at least be a backwards compatible change, right?
We could also we also have deny, so just another option. We can have partial sync, but it's allowed by default unless denied. Yeah, that's like one more way to do it in a backward compatible way. Actually, I like your way more. I think what you proposed is better. Okay, we can. I think let's discuss it. If someone decides to come up with a proposal, I think it's right.
Yeah, I think an issue should be sufficient, right? Not a full blown proposal. But I'm not. Yeah.
All right. Are we good to move to the next topic? Praneeth?
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Praneeth.
Thank you. Okay, so next topic is for me. I just wanted to, I guess it's just a question, I mean, not a question, a reminder about the proposal that I wrote. We discussed it some times ago, and idea was to add a new set of settings into sync policy to help users to automatically terminate sync operation. So during last conversation, I think we agreed that feature is needed, but main question is what kind of settings exactly should be, how the setting should look like. And so just to remind about the use case, currently Argo CD never give up syncing. So if user has a hook that's stuck in a progressing state, then sync operation would never end. That's one problem. And the problem is user have to manually stop, like terminate the sync operation. And the proposal is to just add a timeout. And then second portion of a proposal is to kind of even go one step ahead. And so some users, they have problematic resources. And idea is, let's say application has a deployment and the deployment is known to be flaky and it's progressing for too long, then user can specify an additional timeout, which is shorter than the main sync operation timeout. And so if that particular resource stuck in a progressing state for a few minutes, then sync operation has to be terminated as well. And so proposal is kind of describing these use cases, and the actual proposal is that. So this YAML snippet shows global timeout and resource level timeout, and kind of explaining why it's useful. Yeah, and so I'm asking for review, and if you have any questions right now, I'm happy to answer.
Why health is required, Alex? in that?
Yeah, health is, so I mean, that's an optional field. It doesn't have to be specified by user. And idea that it's kind of like when in a perfect world, we don't need this at all. But from the user who we worked with, they just saying, hey, we have this, there is a problem. Yes, we know that some deployments, they just stuck in progressing states and like we cannot do much about it, but they just looking for some way to reduce wait time. And yeah, so it's kind of like optimization. So the real use case is it's a deployment stuck in progressing state because image is just not there. And it's if things are working fine, deployment just starts and immediately healthy. But if image is not there, they want to let it be like this for up to 5 minutes. And if it's not there in 5 minutes, then 99% chance that sync should be just terminated. So yeah, that's this set of settings. It's a kind of optimization to save 5 minutes of wait, like in this example. Does it
Okay, and so I was mainly asking about the necessity to have the health as
Mhm.
part of this configuration. So I'm trying to understand what is the use case. So the user just wants the timeout if the health state is progressing. Anything else shouldn't time out. Is
Yes,
that correct?
yeah, correct. I think they requested it because they just want to narrow down kind of criteria. So if deployment is healthy, but sync is not finished yet, then something else may be broken. And they it's not okay to just automatically terminate sync because it can be like something actually taking longer than usual and sync just need to continue until it reaches this full timeout. But if Argo CD detects that deployment stuck for 5 minutes, then I mean this particular deployment stuck in progressing state for 5 minutes, then it's like
I was just wondering why, like, what would the timeout change? Like today, the sync would just keep running, right?
This timeout or deployment level?
Both.
Yeah, but today sync would just keep running forever until someone terminated in the UI or user.
Right. Yeah.
And so operation like syncs supposed to be failed, and that failure message would be terminated. Yeah, so just to add more details, at least like one use case was application set plus preview apps. So application set keep changing applications, application auto sync triggers sync and then tries to sync itself. And then if something goes wrong, then this whole automation just breaks and requires human to click, terminate button.
So this would lead to situations where, so let's say an application is configured with multiple waves and they configure like 3 waves, and this happens in wave 1. This means that wave 2 and 3 will be out of sync. Let's say this happens in wave 2. So we sync wave 1, so this is synced and healthy. We sync wave 2 times out, and then wave 3 is not applied in the cluster. And just trying to think some edge cases that this could cause, because today Argo, it really requires the attention of the user to come in and decide what to do. And this automates the process, right? So we might get into a situation that the specific sync timed out, and the user is not even aware of that. So
sure, I think you pointed out that sync status is also needed, because in case of multiple waves, maybe there will be application that's in progressing state in wave 2 and it's out of sync. So basically sync we haven't even done anything to it, and it can be progressing for some time. So I guess, yeah,
I'm not sure if adding an additional health the application at this level. I was mainly thinking about edge cases and maybe identify ways to address that. I guess the main problem with this proposal I see is automating things and not making Argo City administrators aware that happened, and we have a half-synced application in a given environment, for example. So how can we make that more?
But that would be the case with timeout and without timeout, right? I mean,
no, because without timeout, it syncs forever. So the user sees that something is syncing like for a long time. Maybe they have alerts and they decide what to do. It's a human interaction, right? So I guess what I'm trying to say is that there's a difference between a human taking a decision on what is the right thing to do and automating it in a way that it requires some alerting to be defined, so the administrator will be able to understand what's going on. So adding to it just to support my argument.
Yeah, no, that concern is valid, but so my personal opinion on this is, since it's optional, right? I mean, you have to opt in. Like, the timeout is not a default, right? I mean, by default, Argo City would still behave like it behaves today.
Right.
Alex, is that correct?
that's, yeah.
Yeah. So and this will like cater for the situation that you described, Leo. Like, sync is progressing for a long time. A human has to come and check what's best. Or they can say, hey, okay, I want this to run at a maximum of 10 minutes. And if it breaks, it should fail. And maybe you being notified by Argo notifications on a failed deployment. And I guess as long as it's documented that you know,
Yeah.
that if the sync times out, if you configure timeout, and if the sync times out after a while, then probably your environment is left in a undefined state, right? Like maybe the first sync wave, or like the first resources have been synced, but something couldn't sync. So I think while your concern is valid, it's an opt-in thing, and I guess as long as it's documented, it's totally fine. That's at least my
Yeah.
opinion. So
Yeah, so maybe Alex, one suggestion I would give is to add to this proposal maybe a creation of a dedicated Kubernetes event to whenever that happens. So we have a sync timeout, Argo CD sync timeout to be sent. So we can configure alerts and monitoring based on this particular scenario.
Good. Yeah, that makes sense. I think
So just it makes it easier to filter this particular case. And if user wants to get notified by that, then they have the mechanism, right? Instead of digging in the logs and stuff like that. So it gives an additional tool.
I was assuming it's already, like we will, like while implementing it, we will be forced to provide some message,
Yes.
but message like hard to handle programmatically. Event would, we can complement it if we produce Kubernetes event and make sure it's.
Yeah, I think Argo CD already sends Kubernetes. Argo rollouts 100% sure it sends specific Kubernetes events. I don't recall if the sync stage in Argo CD produces Kubernetes events. Don't remember that.
Okay, but yeah, that's a good suggestion. If we make it easier to monitor it, and maybe, yeah, monitoring is a good example. So if we can say, oh, sync failed, and that's the reason why it failed, then we can react to it. Administrators can set up alerts, so totally makes sense.
Cool. I'll add the comment in the proposal.
Awesome. Thanks for feedback.
Thank you.
All right, we have 9 minutes, and we have 2 topics. So Dan is not here, and maybe since it's almost end of meeting, maybe we can just move these 2 topics to to the next meeting, and then can give us a bit.
makes sense.
All right, I'm going to stop sharing and stop recording.